Hi guys, welcome to another video. This is another voiceover video because at the time of filming the weather decided to play up so much the wind was unbearable. So I'm going to do a voiceover because it's much nicer for you guys. So anyway, this is the new tree that I bought a couple of weeks ago. It is a spruce tree. It's only about 10-15 quid at a garden centre, so it's not much, but it's got a really nice design, big chunk to it already. Now on the screen I'll put on my inspiration for doing this. I've been wanting to get a spruce for a while so I could try and recreate in some way, obviously a much more novice way to the picture I've just showed. But anyway, this is the spruce. It's just a basic spruce. I'm not exactly sure on the exact species of spruce, so if you do know, put it in the comments because that would be handy. But this is the beginning and it's going to be a very drastic change to what we end out with. Now my idea for this obviously is to keep the main big trunk and then use one of these side shoots on the side. I'm just having a look around here because there is quite a few possibles for that secondary smaller tree sitting next to the main tree, but I've got to pick the right one, the right position, make sure it's got enough branches on it, because we don't want something that's not going to have the branch structure already there. Now this might be the wrong time to do this kind of stuff. I haven't obviously repotted it this time. We'll do that once it's recovered. But either way, I hope it should feel right. As this voiceover is after the video, the tree has not died yet. Spoiler alert, it's not died yet, so I think we're okay. Now I've just got to let it recover and try and work on the branches a lot more. So this one here I'm waving around is going to be my selected tree. It is the biggest and most prominent secondary branch. So that's after a bit of pruning. We've just basically taken off all of the ones we don't want right coming out the bottom. I think this tree actually has quite a lot of trunk in the ground because a lot of those branches were coming out of the ground. They must have been attached to the trunk further down under the soil layer. So when we come to repot this, it's possibly going to be really interesting to see how much more trunk and any kind of root flare we have on it at all. Now as you can see here, I'm now in the process of basically just selecting my branches. Now when I originally started making this video, my idea was just to cut the branches I don't want and leave the tree with the branches that I do want and wire them another day, just to let the tree recover a bit, because quite frankly I do an awful lot to this tree and it's a bit, I was a bit worried if it was actually going to survive. So I'm just basically taking off all of the ones that are facing towards me. We want ones poking out on the left side. We don't really want any branches coming out the right side. At least that was my idea, because that would get in the way of the other trunk. But after looking at it now, I think there is a few branches that I could have possibly placed crossing over the trunk to make the tree look a little bit more like a tree. This one, I like the outcome, but there are definitely some things that I think I would have done differently. But obviously being a tree and a plant, once it's gone, it's gone. That's why you've always got to think when you're pruning trees and make sure you actually prune the right stuff. So we're going to make another little switch here, little zoom in into the branches down the bottom. And as you can see, I don't want to take them back too much, but all the way up these branches are an absolute ton of smaller buds. And what I'm doing basically is I'm just cutting them back to a nice like fork pair of buds on the branch in an effort to hopefully force the ones up the branch to come out and create more smaller branches, and we get a nice thicker pad to the tree then. So zooming in a bit for you now, as you can see, it's starting to come along. On that smaller tree to the left, I've definitely started to select my branches, and they will be wired down in a way that it's like the snow has been sitting on them with spruce trees. So they're not going to be flat. They're kind of wired down and then brought back up to a same level. I think it will look really good in the future once I put a bit of work into it and actually carry on developing this tree. Obviously I am no professional at all. I'm quite relatively new to this hobby when it comes to actually properly designing trees like this, so my designs are going to be a little off, but bear with. Hopefully it will come out to something somewhat decent in the future. So this bit is a little bit of an iffy bit, was the top of this tree, because obviously I didn't want it as tall as it already was. So what I'm trying to do is distinguish what branches I need, what branch I might turn the new leader into, because we want to add taper up to the tree, and if I left the main big branch, it's really quite thick, and you almost want it, as this being the top of the tree, I end up selecting a much smaller branch, much thinner branch, just to create a little taper and bring down the energy of the tree into the bottom parts of the tree, because obviously most trees, when they're growing, a lot of the energy is put into the tips in an effort just to get bigger and bigger. So as you can see here, this branch here is what I end up keeping, and it's quite a big chop, and I will say now there was definitely some sap loss, so possibly is the wrong time to be big chops like this, but I did make sure I sealed up all of the wounds after the video, just to keep that sap in as much as possible. So we had a sap loss for a couple of days, but the tree is fine now. I don't see any more sap running out, and now just to let it recover. So we take off the top of the tree. It's a big chop, that one, not quite as big as the main branch that we'll do later in the video when we get to it. But yeah, I have cut down this video as well. This video was about 30 minutes long, but I managed to get it down to about 15 minutes, cutting out parts that just went on forever, because quite frankly, 30-minute video, people lose interest, unless you're, you know, making very nice content, which I'm not always. Anyway, so but now just basically, I'm not sure what to do with the top branches at this stage. So what I wanted to do was just take back all of the branches to a couple buds, and then we can come back later and decide eventually what branch and how we're going to do this. Because with the main branch that I'm looking at now, I'm going to cut it back because I want some smaller buds to come out the sides, because as the tree goes up, we don't just want it going up in one straight line. I want to make it so there's branches coming out, and they get smaller and smaller until we get into a nice kind of triangular shape part of the tree. That's what I'm trying to imitate anyway. So I've cut most of them back. We're just going to go through, and just as I was going through, I just kept making sure. It was quite hard to do obviously without wire, because spruce takes a while sometimes to actually get it into position. It does spring back quite quickly, but I did keep trying to check as I was going through on the branch structure, make sure it's how I wanted it, because a lot of my trees are bought, a lot of them are created myself, but they're in the early stages. So, but when I get trees like this, I do want to make sure that I definitely get the practice in. Now anyway, we're moving to the top now. It's a big top of the tree, this one. So with this main trunk, we're basically going to do the same as the smaller trunk. We're going to select the branches and cut them back to those interior buds that are waiting, and in an effort to get them to produce branches, create the pads, thicken them out, get more growth on the tree that way. And then eventually we will come up to the top of the tree. Now there was one sad thing that I think I mistakenly did with this tree. As I was going up from the bottom, I trimmed the bottom branch a bit too much for my liking, and I did realise that after I'd done it. And unfortunately, as the branches go up the tree, the design, they get smaller and smaller, so it's kind of triangular shape. So I wish I had left the younger bottom branch a bit longer, or not pruned it at all, and then all the ones up from that I could have left a little bit longer, and we would have had slightly bigger branches on it. But either way, I am pleased with the result. I think once the branches pad out and thicken up and get into shape properly, it's definitely going to be an interesting tree. Now I'm taking out any branches that cross over into the other tree, because they are kind of separate, so we want to try and cut those ones out. And then most of the branches on this one will kind of be on the right side. As I said earlier, I wish maybe I'd saved a few branches as possible to cut across. It might have looked better. Bearing in mind, I could have left branches on there. They're all quite young, so I didn't necessarily need to cut them all off. But I was kind of wanting to get to that initial design done so I could let the tree recover for the rest of the summer, and then as we go into winter, it can go dormant, and then come next spring hopefully it'll push out all the nice new growth onto those branches that I've pruned back. So big cut here. This is when I took the top of the tree off. This is the front here. As you can see, I've left one branch as the new leader, and left some growth on that, and then hopefully that will create slightly better taper, because we had to balance this main tree with the smaller tree on the left, because if I left it with the original height, that is just way too big, in contrast with a little tree. So at least this way we've got some taper, and we've got the tree now coming together. It's actually a really nice tree to work with, spruce. I've never had a spruce tree before, so it's going to take a bit of time to do all the research on it. But anyway, I did a bit of wiring. I did it off camera, most of it, because I take ages to wire. It would literally be a whole 30-minute video. It took me about 2 hours to do this tree, and about half an hour of that was probably wiring this tree. I'm not the fastest wiring, so I've cut that bit out. But anyway, as you can see here, the branch structure is kind of being pushed down, and then it comes out flat, almost like the snowfall has kept the branches bent downwards. It's a little messy, the wiring, so do excuse that, but I really do like the finished result of this tree. And I've even wired all the smaller branches. I've wired it all very loosely. I didn't want to do it too tight, because being a spruce and being, you know, the growing season, it might grow out a bit and it might create dents in the trunks and the wood, the bark. So I have refrained from doing it too tightly, just enough to keep it in that shape, and then eventually with the smaller wire we can thicken out those pads to the tree. So basically that's it really. That's there's not much more to it. At some point I'll show the the zoomed out version of the tree. The top of the tree though, I'm not massively confident with at the moment. I need to definitely make sure and refine the top of the tree a little bit more, turn the new leaders into new leaders, and let them grow really. As you can see there, I'm just pointing out the new bud that I'm hoping to get growing, and then most of these ones I've left at forks, like that one on the back. So anyway guys, this is the finished result of the tree per the initial design. There's an awful lot that I took off this tree, probably way too much at the wrong time of year. But like I said at the beginning of the video, it is all right now. There's no more sap coming out. The tree hasn't died as of yet, and it's probably been a week and a bit. But I really think this tree has a possible really nice design to it in the future. Obviously at the moment it's looking a bit dull and a bit weak. But once these pads start filling out and the branches start thickening up a bit more, come next year we will basically just let it grow all throughout the year, and then maybe give it a prune in the late summer. But apart from that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I shall see you in the next one.